A love dot beyond time.
The rain fell softly that evening, as if the sky itself refused to let go of what it held inside. Aruna stood by the window of her small rented house, watching the droplets paint blurry stories on the glass. It had been 3 years since she last saw Dua, the man who once promised her forever under the same kind of rain. They were young then, reckless in their love, certain that time was on their side. But life, as it often does, took a different path. Dua had to move abroad for work, and Aruna, with 1,000 fears but the same unwavering love, chose to wait. Letters were exchanged, video calls made, hearts held together by the invisible thread of longing. But as the months turned to years, the silence between them grew louder. Until one day, the silence became goodbye. Aruna never truly knew what ended them. There were no fights, no betrayals, only distance and time that slowly wore away at what once felt eternal. She tried to move on, but the rain always brought him back. Now, as thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, Aruna wiped the glass with her sleeve and turned away. Today was different, not because she had forgotten Dua, but because she had chosen to marry someone else. Adrian was nothing like Dua. He was calm, quiet, and always present. He didn't make grand promises, he simply stayed. Aruna never fell head over heels for him, but she grew into the comfort he offered. He was not the love that made her heart race, but the one that let her heart rest. Their wedding was simple, attended only by close family. Aruna smiled in every photo, but behind her smile was a silent farewell to a love that had once defined her. That night, after the guests had gone home and the lights had dimmed, Aruna sat by the bed, holding a small notebook that Dua once gave her. Inside were pressed flowers and half-written poems. She traced her fingers over the pages, and for a moment, she allowed herself to cry. Not for regret, but for the acceptance that some love stories are meant to end, even if they once felt like forever. The morning after the wedding, Aruna awoke not to the pounding excitement of a new bride, but to the quiet rhythm of Adrian making coffee in the kitchen. She sat up slowly, letting the silence fill the space between their two bodies, close yet somehow still strangers. Adrian handed her a mug without saying a word. It was how he had always been, gentle, careful, not asking more than what she could give. Aruna took the coffee and gave a faint smile. She appreciated him more than she could express. But she also knew appreciation wasn't the same as love. She tried. Every day she tried. She smiled at his jokes, cooked his favorite meals, and let him hold her hand during long drives. There was a certain peace in Adrian's presence. He never pressured her to open the parts of herself she had locked away. In fact, he seemed to understand that there were corners of her heart that might never fully belong to him. But some nights were harder than others. Especially the rainy ones. When the sky poured, Aruna often found herself by the window again, just like years before. The sound of the rain still whispered Dua's name, and sometimes she hated how memory worked, how it brought someone back with the smell of petrichor or the echo of a familiar song. Adrian would notice, of course. He wasn't blind. But he never asked. Instead, he would sit quietly beside her, sometimes holding her hand, sometimes just offering his warmth. It was his way of saying, "I'm here. Even if your heart is still somewhere else." And somehow, that presence, so still, so patient, began to matter. One evening, as the rain fell again and the lights dimmed low, Aruna whispered, "I don't know how to stop remembering him." Adrian didn't look at her. He simply replied, "You don't have to. I just hope one day, you'll start remembering us too." Aruna didn't answer. But for the first time in a long while, she let her head rest on Adrian's shoulder, and in that quiet moment, she felt something shift. Not an ending, not yet a beginning, but a small step toward healing. It was on an ordinary Sunday morning at the traditional market that the past finally caught up with her. Aruna was looking through a pile of ripe tomatoes, her hand hesitating between two, when a familiar voice behind her broke the moment. "Still choosing the firm ones first?" She froze. Slowly, she turned. And there he was, Dua. He looked older. His jaw was sharper, his eyes deeper. The boy she once loved had grown into a man, but something in his gaze remained the same. Familiar. Dangerous. Aruna's breath hitched. "Dua," she said, barely above a whisper. He smiled, gently. Not the confident smile he used to wear, but one touched by time and what felt like regret. "Hi, Aruna." They stood there, in the middle of the busy market, surrounded by strangers and noise, yet everything else disappeared. She could still hear his laugh in the back of her memory. Still remember the way he used to hold her hand, like he was anchoring himself to something real. "I didn't know you were back," she said, voice steadier now. "I came back last year. I've been around." His eyes flicked to the wedding ring on her finger. He didn't ask about it. Aruna tried to compose herself. "How have you been?" Dua nodded, eyes soft. "Better. Calmer. But seeing you," he trailed off. "I didn't think it would still feel like this." She looked away, heart pounding. "It shouldn't feel like anything, Dua. That part of us ended. Did it?" The question lingered. Not an accusation, not a plea. Just a question. Aruna inhaled deeply. "I'm married now." "I know," he said quickly. "And I'm not here to undo anything. I wanted to see you. Even just once." She looked at him again, really looked. He was no longer the man she waited for at the window, no longer the memory she clung to on rainy nights. He was real now, standing in front of her, and that reality was enough to break something open and close something else. "Take care, Dua," she said quietly, reaching for the tomatoes again, her hands now steady. He didn't stop her. He didn't ask for more. He simply smiled once more, nodded, and walked away. And for the first time since their goodbye, Aruna didn't feel shattered. Just still. The encounter with Dua stirred a storm inside Aruna that she didn't know how to name. That night, the silence at home felt heavier than ever. Adrian noticed, of course, but he didn't ask. He never did. At dinner, Aruna picked at her food while Adrian talked about work, about a colleague's wedding, about the price of garlic at the market. His voice was calm, steady, like an anchor. But Aruna's thoughts drifted, back to the market, to Dua's eyes, to the question he never voiced. "I saw someone today," she finally said, cutting him off mid-sentence. Adrian looked up. "Someone from before?" She nodded. "Dua." His expression didn't change much. Just a flicker, so quick it could have been imagined. "Did you talk?" "A little." Silence settled between them like a third presence at the table. Not heavy, not hostile, just there. "Do you still love him?" Adrian asked, quietly. Aruna looked down at her untouched rice. "I don't know." It was the most honest answer she could give. And Adrian, being Adrian, simply nodded. "I'm not angry," he said after a moment. "I knew from the start that I wasn't stepping into a clean slate." Tears welled up in her eyes, not because of guilt, but because of the way he always met her half-broken heart with whole patience. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I know," he said.
And that's all I've ever asked." That night, they lay in bed facing opposite directions. Aruna stared at the ceiling, wondering what it meant to truly love someone. Was it passion? Memory? Or was it the person who stayed even when your heart hadn't yet arrived? She remembered a poem Dua once wrote for her. "Some loves arrive like thunder, but others linger like light, quiet, constant, never fading." Lying beside Adrian now, she wondered, was it possible that the second kind of love, the quiet one, was the one that lasted? She didn't have the answer yet, but she knew she wanted to find it. With Adrian. Weeks passed. Dua didn't reach out again, and Aruna didn't look for him. The market remained just a market. The rain became only rain. Still, something inside her had shifted. It wasn't that she suddenly forgot the past, but she no longer let it speak louder than the present. Each morning, she woke up beside Adrian and found herself noticing him more. The way he always prepared her tea just the way she liked it, the way he folded laundry with quiet care, the way his hand always found hers during movies, without asking, without needing a reason. There was no grand romance in the air, no sparks, no dizzying infatuation, but there was peace. And the peace began to feel like home. One afternoon, as they were cleaning out a drawer full of old receipts and keys with no locks, Adrian found a photo, one of Aruna and Dua. It was faded, slightly curled at the edges, but full of youthful joy. Aruna froze, unsure of what to say. Adrian studied it for a moment, then handed it to her. "Do you want to keep it?" She hesitated. "I'm not sure." "It's okay if you do," he said gently. "You don't have to erase where you've been." That simple sentence undid something inside her. She looked at him, not just at his face, but at his heart. At the way he never asked her to pretend, never demanded anything she couldn't give. He had chosen her, fully aware of the cracks in her foundation. And slowly, patiently, he was helping her rebuild. That evening, Aruna placed the photo in a box with other memories, not hidden, but not on display either. Not forgotten, but no longer her anchor. Later, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, she leaned into Adrian's side. He wrapped an arm around her, like always. "I think I'm starting to fall for you," she whispered, unsure if it would scare him or soften him. But he just smiled and kissed the top of her head. "Then I'll wait, like I always have." And in that golden silence, with the light slowly fading into night, Aruna finally allowed herself to breathe, not as someone who was still running, but as someone who had finally stopped. A year had passed since their wedding. Aruna didn't plan anything elaborate. She wasn't the kind of woman who believed in grand anniversaries, not anymore. But that morning, she woke up with a thought she hadn't expected: gratitude. She turned to find Adrian already awake, watching her with a sleepy smile. "Morning," he whispered. "Morning," she replied, tracing a finger across his collarbone. "Do you remember what day it is?" "I do," he said. "But I wasn't sure if you wanted to." Aruna sat up, brushing the hair from her face. "I do. I want to." They spent the day simply. Breakfast at their favorite roadside stall, a visit to a small used bookstore, then a quiet walk through the botanical garden where Adrian once held her hand for the first time. There were no roses, no fancy dinners, no dramatic declarations, but there was laughter, easy conversation, and the kind of silence that no longer felt like distance. At sunset, they sat at a wooden bench overlooking a lake, the orange sky reflected in still water. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I know we said no gifts," he said, "but I saw this and thought of you." Inside was a silver necklace with a tiny raindrop-shaped pendant. Simple. Elegant. "It reminded me of you," he added. "Of how you carry storms but still shine." Aruna felt tears prick at her eyes. Not from sadness, not from nostalgia, but from a kind of quiet joy she hadn't felt in a long time. A soft fullness that made her heart ache in a good way. "I don't have anything for you," she whispered. "You're here," Adrian said. "That's more than enough." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she didn't feel the weight of what was missing. Instead, she felt the presence of everything that was there, this moment, this man, this love. Aruna leaned in and kissed him, slowly, with intention. No ghosts, no echoes, just him. "Happy anniversary," she said against his lips. He smiled. "To many more quiet years." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Aruna knew that she had not only chosen the right man, she had become the right woman, too. It was on a quiet Sunday that Aruna found them, letters tucked away in a box beneath her old scarves, sealed but never mailed. They were all addressed to Dua. There were 7 of them, dated across 3 years. She remembered writing them during her hardest nights, when the silence between their video calls became unbearable. Back then, she'd poured everything into ink, her love, her fears, her longing, and later, her confusion, her loneliness. She hadn't meant to keep them. She had planned to send them, to ask questions she never had the courage to voice. But she never did. Now, reading them again, Aruna saw a version of herself she barely recognized. A girl who waited, who hoped so fiercely, who clung to the idea of a love that had already slipped away. She read every letter, one by one. Some made her smile, others made her cry. And when she reached the last one, dated just a week before Dua stopped responding, her hands trembled. "Maybe love isn't always enough," it read. "Maybe timing is cruel. Maybe we only get one perfect moment, and we already spent ours. But if you ever wonder if I loved you, I did. Entirely. Painfully. Still." Aruna folded the letter slowly and placed it back with the others. But this time, she didn't feel the urge to keep them. She walked to the backyard, lit a small fire in their clay stove, and one by one, fed the letters to the flames. The smoke curled upward into the sky, carrying with it years of unspoken words. Adrian found her there a few minutes later, silent, watching the last ashes fall. He didn't ask what she was burning. He simply walked up beside her, took her hand, and stood with her in the quiet. "I'm letting go," Aruna whispered. "I know," he said. And in that moment, the letting go didn't feel like losing something. It felt like making room for something new. The rainy season returned. Once, it had been her season of longing, each drop a reminder of what she'd lost. But now, as the skies darkened and thunder rolled in the distance, Aruna didn't flinch. She stood by the window with a mug of tea, watching the streets turn slick and silver, her heart unusually still. Adrian walked in behind her, towel around his neck, fresh from his evening jog. His hair was damp, and he was humming softly, off tune, but endearing. "It's pouring out there," he said. "I know," Aruna replied. "But it doesn't ache like it used to." Adrian looked at her, gently. "What does it feel like now?" She thought for a moment. "Like it's just rain. And maybe that's a good thing." He stepped beside her, their reflections faint in the glass. "Do you miss him today?" "No," she said, and this time it wasn't a denial, it was truth. "I remember him. But I don't miss him." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the soft percussion on the roof. The rain still whispered stories, but they were no longer only about Dua. They were about healing, presence, and beginnings. Adrian slipped his fingers into hers. "You're different these days." "So are you." "Do you think we made it?" he asked. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I think we're making it." Later that night, after dinner and laughter and a small argument over which movie to watch, Aruna found herself sketching. She hadn't drawn in years, not since before the heartbreaks and departures. But now her pencil moved with ease, lines forming a silhouette of a woman in the rain, smiling, not searching. Adrian peeked over her shoulder. "Is that you?" She nodded. "And what's she thinking about?" "She's thinking," Aruna said softly, "that maybe the rain brought her exactly where she needed to be." Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside, something new had begun to bloom. Life continued in small, meaningful ways. Aruna had started teaching a weekend art class at the community center. Children with messy hands and wild imaginations gathered around her every Saturday, eager to turn colors into chaos and stories into strokes. It brought her a joy she hadn't expected. One afternoon, after class, a familiar figure appeared by the doorway, Dua. He looked older still. A little tired. A little more at peace. "I heard you were teaching here," he said. "I wasn't sure if I should come." Aruna wiped her hands on her apron. "What made you decide to?" "I just wanted to see who you became." She didn't smile, but she didn't turn him away either. "Then look." Dua stepped inside, taking in the drawings, the cluttered shelves, the streaks of pastel still on her fingers. "You look happy," he said at last. "I am," Aruna answered. He nodded, like that was the only answer he needed. "I'm leaving again," Dua said. "For good this time. Starting a new job abroad." Aruna didn't ask where or why. That was no longer her place. "I'm glad we met again," he added. "So am I," she said. "It helped me close something that needed closing." He looked down for a moment, then met her eyes. "You were my once-in-a-lifetime." Aruna felt the weight of those words settle over the space between them, but this time it didn't crush her. She stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "And you were mine," she said. "But not my forever." It was not an apology. It was a truth, softly spoken. Dua smiled, a real one. Take care, Aruna. You too. And just like that, he was gone. That evening, Aruna returned home to Adrian, who was fixing a leaky faucet in the kitchen, cursing under his breath. She laughed. Need help? He looked up, dripping wet. Always. She kissed his forehead, then reached for a wrench. As the pipes clanged and water splashed around them, Aruna thought, sometimes love doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with leaky sinks and shared burdens. And that's enough. Years passed, not with drama, but with seasons. The small apartment they called home became a house with more windows. The art studio expanded. Adrian's job settled into something steady and fulfilling. There were no children, not yet, but their lives were full in other ways. Dinner with friends, weekend road trips, growing herbs on the balcony that never seemed to survive the winter. One night, under a sky riddled with stars, Aruna sat beside Adrian in their backyard, sipping warm tea. The cicadas hummed, and the scent of jasmine floated in the night air. Do you ever think about what might have been? She asked softly. Sometimes, he said. But not for long. Me too. She leaned her head against his shoulder. The skin around his eyes crinkled when he smiled, lines she had learned to love. I used to think forever was about passion that never faded, she whispered. About a love so loud it echoed. And now? He asked. Now I think it's about someone who brings you tea without asking. Who sits beside you in silence and still hears everything. Who stays, even when you're not always easy to stay with. Adrian kissed the top of her head. I've never needed it to be loud. I just needed it to be real. And it was. It was in the mundane. In grocery lists and missed alarms. In hospital visits and quiet apologies. In the way they chose each other, every single day, even on the days it was hard. Aruna once thought that kind of love was boring. Now she knew better. It wasn't boring. It was brave. And maybe, just maybe, that was the kind of forever that really mattered, not the one written in poetry or sung in love songs, but the one built with gentle hands and patient hearts. The stars above them shimmered like tiny promises, and Aruna closed her eyes, whispering one final truth into the night. Forever isn't a promise. It's a practice. And she would keep practicing. With him.